The wind howled outside as the old apartment building groaned in the cold. Rain hit the windows like tiny stones. Inside his small room on the second floor, Mason sat alone, a bowl of leftover noodles in his lap. He had just turned off the heater to save power. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. Then there was a knock. It wasn't loud. It was slow and weak, as if the person outside had no strength left. Mason paused. No one ever came here at this hour, and the rain was coming down hard. He stood up, placed the bowl on the table, and stepped toward the door. Another knock, softer this time. When he opened the door, he saw her. A young alien girl stood there, soaking wet, clothes stuck to her thin frame. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Her large violet eyes were wide and filled with fear. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, but her lips were pale from the cold. She held a small bag close to her chest with both hands. I don't have anywhere to go," she said, her voice shaking like her body. "I can pay." Before Mason could ask anything, she dropped the bag and reached for the zipper of her coat. She started to pull it down, her hands trembling. Her movements weren't seductive, they were desperate. Mason stepped forward quickly and grabbed her hands gently, stopping her. "No," he said firmly. "You don't have to do that." She froze. He took a deep breath and picked up the blanket from the couch behind him. Without asking, he wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're cold. Sit down. Rest first," he said. Guiding her inside. She hesitated, then slowly walked in, barefoot and dripping. He closed the door behind her and turned the heater back on. "What's your name?" Mason asked as he handed her a warm towel. She didn't answer. She only clutched the blanket tighter around her. Mason didn't push her. He moved to the kitchen and poured a hot cup of tea. She sat on the couch, shaking, staring at the steam coming from the mug he offered. "Thank you," she whispered. Finally, he sat across from her, watching closely. There were bruises on her arms. Her knees were scraped. Whoever she was, she had been through a lot. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked softly. She looked away. Mason didn't press. He knew that silence often meant more than words. He just nodded and said, "You can sleep here tonight. No rent, no payment." Her eyes widened. She blinked, confused. "Why?" she asked. "Because you look like you need help." "That's all," he said. For a long moment, she just stared at him like she didn't understand. Then she finally took a sip of the tea. Her hands were still trembling, but she held the cup carefully. "Can I stay just one night?" she asked. "You can stay as long as you need," Mason replied. He gave her some dry clothes from his closet. They were too big for her, but she didn't complain. She disappeared into the bathroom to change. When she came out, she was wearing his hoodie and sweatpants, the sleeves covering her hands. He laid out a spare blanket on the couch and gave her a pillow. She sat down slowly, wrapping herself tightly. The storm outside was getting louder, but the room felt warmer now. As he turned off the main light and got ready for bed, she spoke again. "My name is Rinya," she said quietly. Mason smiled from the other side of the room. "Nice to meet you, Rinya." She didn't smile back. Her face stayed serious, almost scared. "You don't know what I've done," she whispered. "Maybe not," Mason said, pulling his blanket over himself. "But I know what I saw. A girl who needed help, not judgment." Rinya didn't answer, but she laid down on the couch and curled into a ball. Mason listened as the rain hit the window harder. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Something told him this wasn't going to be simple. She hadn't come here by accident. And someone somewhere would come looking for her. But tonight, he would let her rest. And if someone tried to hurt her again, they'd have to get through him first. Mason woke up to silence. No sirens, no wind, not even the creaking of the old ceiling above him. Just the faint scent of tea and wet clothes. He sat up slowly and looked toward the couch. It was empty. His heart skipped a beat. The blanket lay neatly folded, the pillow untouched, and the oversized hoodie he gave her hung carefully on the back of the chair. Had she left? Then he heard it. The soft sound of running water. He stood and walked toward the kitchen. That's where he found her. Rinya was washing the dishes. Her blue skin shimmered slightly in the morning light, and her hands moved carefully as if every plate was made of glass. She had found one of his spare shirts and wore it like a dress. Her wet hair was tied up with a piece of cloth. "You didn't have to do that," Mason said. She paused but didn't turn to face him. "You gave me shelter," she replied. "I want to earn it." "You already did," Mason said gently, "by trusting me." She stayed quiet for a moment, then turned off the water and dried her hands with a towel. She stood stiffly, like she was ready to be scolded. "I won't stay long," she said. "I just need a day, maybe 2. "You can stay as long as you want," he repeated. She looked away. "That's dangerous, for you." Mason leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "Then tell me who's after you." Rinya shook her head. "No one you want to meet." She moved to the small window, peeking out through the curtain like someone always expecting a shadow. Mason sighed. "What about your family? Friends?" "I don't have any," she said flatly. "Everyone has someone," he said, "not me." He watched her closely. She wasn't lying. That emptiness in her voice wasn't just sadness. It was final. "What happened to your name?" he asked, trying a different path. She didn't answer at first. Then she looked at him, her eyes tired and distant. "My real name was erased when I was sold. They called me Unit 7R for years. Rinya is something I chose for myself after I escaped." Mason's stomach twisted. "You were ... trafficked?" "Yes, on planet Vorthus. It's common there. Girls like me, weak, small, quiet, we disappear easily. I was taken when I was 9 cycles old." That's slavery," Rinya nodded once. "It's legal where I came from." Mason rubbed his forehead. He had heard rumors about backwater alien planets still running off ancient systems, but hearing it directly made his blood boil. "But you escaped," he said. "I did." "How?" She stared at the floor, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter. There was a fire at the holding center. One of the guards left the door open while escaping. "I ran. I kept running. Changed planets. Took odd jobs. Learned how to stay hidden." Mason noticed something strange, the way she said. Odd jobs didn't match her body. Her hands were too soft for physical labor, but her legs had bruises and her spine looked stiff, like she had slept on metal floors too long. He stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She flinched. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I know," she whispered. "I just forget what safety feels like." There was silence between them again, but it wasn't cold this time. It was heavy, like the air had too many unspoken truths floating inside it. "I'll go soon," she said again. "No," Mason replied. "You'll stay until you're ready. And even then, if you want help, I'll give it." Rinya looked up at him, confused. "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because when I was alone and broken, someone gave me a place to rest too. Now I'm passing it forward." Her lip trembled. For a second, it looked like she might cry. But instead, she nodded and turned away. "Do you want breakfast?" she asked softly. "I was about to ask you the same." They cooked together quietly. She didn't know how to use the stove, so he showed her. She didn't eat much, like someone not used to having food every day. She smiled once when he gave her fruit and said she hadn't tasted real sugar in years. After breakfast, she looked around his apartment. "Do you live alone?" "I did," Mason said. She walked to his bookshelf and picked up a photo of him. "With another man. Your brother?" "Best friend. He passed away during the war." "I'm sorry," he nodded. "I'm getting used to silence." But it's nice to have company for once. She placed the photo back gently. As the morning sun lit up the room, something in her seemed to relax just a little. But outside the apartment, down the alley, someone stood watching from a distance. A tall figure in dark robes, speaking softly. "Into a come. I've found her," the voice said. "Send the unit. She's in the human's home." The storm returned 2 nights later. Rain hammered against the windows like fists demanding to be let in. Thunder rolled over the city skyline, and lightning flashed across the rooftops. Mason had just finished drying dishes when Rinya spoke for the first time in hours. "They'll find me soon," she said softly, staring into her cup of tea. "You don't know that," Mason replied. She shook her head. "They always find what they think they own." Mason walked to the window and checked the street below. Empty, quiet, but the quiet felt wrong tonight, like it was hiding something. He double-checked the door locks. That's when the knock came. It wasn't like hers had been. This one was sharp. 3 precise thumps, like the person on the other side knew exactly who lived here and didn't plan on waiting long. Rinya froze. The color drained from her face. Mason whispered, "Get in the back room, now." She hesitated, then ran, her bare feet silent on the floor. Mason grabbed the kitchen knife and stepped to the door. Another knock. Then silence. He opened the door a crack, just enough to see the visitor. A tall alien male stood there, skin rough, like stone, eyes burning gold under a wet hood. His coat was black and heavy, soaked from the rain, but he didn't seem cold. His hands were behind his back, standing still like a soldier. "Are you the tenant of Unit 2B? The man asked, voice low and calm. Mason didn't answer. The man continued, "I am looking for someone. A missing transport slave from Vorthis. Blue skin, young female. Maybe injured, maybe confused. Have you seen her?" Mason stared through the crack and said, "No one like that here." The man's gold eyes narrowed slightly. "She may be using a false name. She stole something. Something important." "I think you've got the wrong building," Mason said flatly. The man smiled slightly, but it wasn't kind. "If she shows up, report her. There's a reward." "I'm not interested." The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I can smell her inside your walls. She's here, isn't she?" Before Mason could speak, a low chirping sound came from the man's wrist device. He checked the screen. "I'll return," he said, turning away. "Let's hope you make better choices." "Bye then." As the man walked down the hallway, Mason locked the door and bolted it tight. Rinya peeked out from the bedroom doorway, her body trembling. "That was him," she said. "His name is Thor. He used to train the girls that didn't obey." Mason's face tightened. "He's not coming back in here. I'll find a way to keep you safe." But Rinya was already shaking her head. "You don't understand. He doesn't just want me back. He wants what I carry." She sat down slowly, clutching her bag to her chest. Mason stepped closer and knelt in front of her. "You never told me what's inside that thing," he said gently. She opened the zipper a few inches and pulled out a strange oval object. It glowed faintly, like it held a heart inside. Carved metal rings wrapped around it, etched with alien script Mason couldn't read. "This is a memory core," Rinya said. "It holds records from the mines of Vorthis, proof that their entire slave trade is funded by illegal tech from ancient war vaults. If this gets to the right hands, the Vorthis system will collapse." Mason stared. "You're carrying the evidence that could destroy their empire?" She nodded. "That's why they branded me a thief. That's why I ran." "And now he's here," Mason muttered. "He'll come back with others," she said. "They never travel alone. The first visit is just a warning." Mason stood and locked every window, every vent. Then he looked at her. "Then we don't wait," he said. "We leave tonight." Rinya's eyes widened. "You'd leave your life behind for Me? Mason shrugged. There's not much here worth staying for. But you came to my door, thinking you had to give yourself away to survive. That's not something I can forget. Rinya's lips trembled again, but this time, no tears came. She nodded. They packed quietly. Mason took only what they needed. Credits, food rations, medical packs. He kept the memory core in a metal case and taped it beneath the bottom of his bag. Rinya changed into dry clothes and tied her hair back. Just before they left, she stopped at the window. There's one safe place, she whispered. A man in the outer rings. He helped free others like me. If we reach him, he can send the evidence to the Galactic Peace Council. What's his name? Mason asked. Rinya paused. His name is Kale ... and he's my real brother. Asterisk. The train hissed as it pulled out of the station, vanishing into the tunnels that ran beneath the city's surface. Mason and Rinya sat near the rear, their faces hidden beneath low hoods, shoulders touching, but neither speaking. It was their second transfer of the night. Every few stops, Mason would check over his shoulder. Every time he saw nothing, just tired miners, delivery bots, and a few homeless drifters. But Rinya didn't stop watching the doors. Her fingers stayed clenched around the strap of her bag. Her eyes stayed wide, never blinking for too long. She wasn't just afraid of being caught, she was afraid of being recognized. As the train rocked gently forward, Mason finally spoke. You said you had a brother, Kale. Why didn't he come for you? Rinya didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, because I told him not to. Mason frowned. Why? She took a slow breath, then reached into her bag and pulled out an old folded photo. The colors were faded, but Mason could see two small alien children sitting on a rusted swing set. A boy and a girl, both with blue skin, both smiling. That's us, she said. Back before everything. He looks older than you. He was, by 3 cycles. He used to protect me. Used to sneak extra food from the waste units. He even stole a guard's key once just to get me out of a punishment cell. What happened to him? They caught him. And I watched them beat him half to death in front of the others. Mason swallowed hard. They took him away, Rinya continued. Said he was too dangerous to be a slave. For years I thought they killed him. But last season I heard rumors that Kale had escaped the system and was helping rescue girls from camps. When I finally ran, I used everything I had to send a message to the name they whispered, Kale of the Outer Rings. Mason looked down at the photo again. I told him not to come, she said, voice shaking, because I knew Thor would follow. And Kale, he's all I have left. If they got him too, her voice broke. Mason leaned forward, hands clasped. You did what you had to, but we'll find him now. Together. Suddenly, the train jerked to a stop too fast. The lights flickered. An announcement crackled through the speakers in a language Mason didn't understand. Rinya's head snapped toward the front. That's Vorthan dialect, she said. This isn't a normal stop. Mason stood and peeked out the window. 3 armored figures had stepped onto the platform outside, tall and silent. Their armor was black and silver with red visors. Thor's search squad, Rinya said under her breath. We have to move, Mason said, pulling her hand. They ran through the train car, weaving past confused passengers. A door on the side led to a utility tunnel, rusted and dark. Mason forced it open and yanked Rinya through. He slammed the door behind them and twisted the lock. The tunnel was barely lit and smelled like burning wires and old oil. Pipes dripped from above, and the ground sloped downward. They kept running. I thought you said Kale was in the outer rings, Mason panted. He is, Rinya said. But there's only one way there without going through the border scans. Let me guess, illegal path. She gave a tired nod. After 20 minutes of running, they slowed near a maintenance shaft. Rinya dropped to her knees, pried open a vent, and motioned Mason to follow. Inside, it was a tight squeeze, barely enough room to crawl. This is where I went when I first escaped, she whispered. No one follows through here. It's too dangerous. Then why do it again? Because this time, I'm not alone. They crawled through silence, broken only by the scrape of knees and the distant echo of trains far above. Mason could feel his heartbeat in his ears. Finally, they dropped into a small sealed chamber. The air was warmer here. Soft lights lined the wall, glowing green. A figure stepped out of the shadows. He was older, taller, and stronger. Same blue skin, but rougher, more weathered. A long scar ran from his chin to his collarbone. His eyes met Rinya's and froze. "Rinya," he whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "Kale." She ran forward, and he caught her, lifting her off the ground. Mason turned his face, giving them the moment. "I thought you were dead, Kale." Saad, holding her close. "I found the memory core," she whispered. "I brought it." Kale turned to Mason. "You helped her?" "She knocked on my door," Mason said, "and everything changed." Kale looked at him with new respect. "You have no idea what you've stepped into, human. But now that you have, there's no turning back." The underground hideout didn't feel like a rescue base. It felt like a war bunker. Metal crates were stacked along the walls. Some carried weapons, others food packs labeled in 5 different alien dialects. A long table at the center held tools, maps, and an old hollow projector that hummed with static. Kale paced beside it, arms crossed, while Mason sat nearby. The weight of the memory core growing heavier in his pack. Rinya sat between them, staring at the floor, eyes distant. "I need to see it," Kale said. Mason pulled the wrapped object from his bag and placed it on the table. Kale carefully unwrapped the metal rings and touched the core's surface. It lit up immediately, casting swirling lights around the room. Lines of alien script ran across the table like veins. Mason couldn't read them, but Kale could. "It's real," Kale said, voice low. "What's inside?" Mason asked. "Blueprints." Kale replied. "Coordinates, shipment logs. Names of buyers, names of children taken. This doesn't just prove what Vorthus did, it proves which planets paid them to keep doing it." Rinya looked up. "They'll destroy whole cities just to keep this hidden, Kale." Kale nodded grimly. "Which is why we don't keep it here." He turned and opened a storage drawer. Inside was a black case with a biolock. He opened it, revealing a small transmitter with a blinking blue light. "I've been building a relay," he said. "It bounces the signal through old relay satellites. No one can trace the source. If we upload the data, the entire Peace Council will see it." Mason leaned in. "Then what are we waiting for?" Kale looked at Rinya. "Because once we do, there's no running anymore." Rinya stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but her face was calm. "I ran for most of my life. I'm tired of running." Kale nodded. "Rin." You handed him the core. He placed it inside the relay and tapped a few buttons. The lights dimmed. The room filled with a soft humming as the signal began transmitting. But halfway through the upload, the power flickered. The screen turned red. "Error, uplink blocked. What's going on?" Mason asked. Kale's face turned hard. "They're jamming us. Someone's nearby." At that moment, a siren blared from the other room. A young alien boy burst into the bunker. "Scanners picked up 3 heat signatures above us. They're trying to cut through the surface hatch." Kale grabbed his weapon. "We've been found." Mason stood quickly. "How did they find this place?" Rinya stepped back, clutching her chest. Her eyes were wide with sudden horror. "It's me," she whispered. "The core. They placed a tracker in the shell. It activated when we tried to open the signal." Mason's stomach sank. "Can we move the data?" Kale shook his head. "It's a mid-transfer. If we interrupt it, the data corrupts." "So what do we do?" Kale turned to the young boy. "Evacuate the tunnels. Get everyone out the side path." Then he turned to Mason and Rinya. We hold them off until the upload finishes. Mason stepped forward. You mean we fight them? Cale handed him a sidearm. You're not a soldier, I get that. But if you're going to stay here, you'll have to be ready to become one. Rinya grabbed Mason's hand. You don't have to do this. I never wanted to drag you into this. You didn't, Mason said softly. I chose to stay the night you knocked. She blinked, lips trembling. You could have turned me in. You were more than just someone in need. You reminded me what it means to care, and I'm not letting them take that away. The hatch above shook violently, then the roof cracked open. A burst of smoke poured in as a dark figure dropped through tall, armored, and carrying a plasma weapon. His visor locked onto Rinya instantly. Target located. Thor's voice echoed through the bunker. Cale fired first, striking Thor's armor and staggering him. Mason dove behind a crate, pulling Rinya down with him. Thor fired back, missing by inches, the blast scorching the wall. We have to buy 30 more seconds. Cale shouted. Mason gritted his teeth. Then we hold the line. As the countdown on the console ticked down, Mason peeked out and fired 2 shots. One hit Thor's shoulder, the other his leg. Thor growled and smashed through a support beam, bringing half the ceiling down behind him. Rinya screamed as the room shook. Console flashed green. Upload complete signal. S&T. Cale roared. It's done. Move. Mason grabbed Rinya's hand and ran. Behind them, Thor stood slowly, blood dripping from his armor. His eyes burned with fury. You'll regret this, he snarled. But they were already gone, vanishing into the tunnels with the truth. Finally unleashed across the stars. Asterisk, the emergency tunnel twisted like a metal serpent, each bend tighter than the last. Mason's hands were bleeding from scraping the walls. Rinya ran just ahead of him, her breath sharp and shallow. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed louder, closer. Left. Cale's voice shouted from up front. They turned sharply, splashing through ankle-deep water. Pipes groaned overhead as the heat from the busted power cells behind them made the air shimmer. Cale slammed the door shut behind them and dropped a steel bar across the latch. That won't hold long, he said, panting. We need to reach the surface vent. It's our only exit. How far? Mason asked. 4 levels up, and it's vertical. Mason looked up the narrow shaft. A rusty ladder stretched into the dark, lined with warning signs. That thing doesn't look safe. It's not, Cale said, already climbing. But it's what we've got. Rinya hesitated. Mason looked at her. You okay? She nodded. Slowly, but her hands were shaking. I'm just tired. I know. But we're almost out. Rinya grabbed the ladder and started to climb. As they ascended, the memory core, now in Cale's backpack, kept pulsing with a soft glow, like it could sense danger around them. Each rung groaned under weight, and every few feet, they passed through thin streams of leaking steam. Then a low hum echoed from below. Mason glanced down. Thor's voice came through the smoke. You think you've won, little girl? Truth doesn't save people, it only makes enemies. Rinya froze. Mason whispered, keep moving. I can't, she said. If we get caught, they'll kill you because of me. We're in this together now. You're not alone anymore. She closed. Her eyes inclined again. At the top of the shaft, Cale kicked open a metal panel, revealing night sky and cold wind. Come on, he shouted. He helped Rinya up. Then Mason. They spilled out onto a rooftop high above the outer rings, a forgotten part of the city, where most buildings were half ruined or crumbling. Below them, spotlights moved across the streets. Extraction points 2 blocks east, Cale said, checking a blinking device in his hand. An old scout pilot owes me a favor. He's coming in low. No flight permits. We have 5 minutes. They ran across the rooftop. Wind ripped through them like knives. Mason looked down at the city neon lights, floating cars, and flashing drones. All of it looked so far away from the tiny apartment he used to call home. Then, his biggest worry was rent. Now he was helping an alien girl expose a galactic crime syndicate, and strangely, he didn't regret it. A soft whir filled the air. A small dropship hovered low, its side door opening as it turned. "Run!" Cale shouted, but before they reached the edge, something exploded behind them. Thor shot up through the rooftop like a missile, jetpack roaring. His armor smoked from the fight, but he looked more furious than injured. Cale fired first, but Thor slammed him aside like a ragdoll. Rinja screamed. Mason turned to shield her, his hand going for his weapon. Thor landed in front of them, grabbing Mason by the neck and lifting him off the ground. "You ruined everything." Thor snarled. Mason struggled, gasping, "You're the one who chained her. She was born to serve." "No," Rinja said, stepping forward, voice firm. "I was born free. You just never let me believe it." Thor turned. That's when Cale, bloody but alive, rolled over and kicked a metal rod toward Rinja. She grabbed it. With a scream, she swung the rod straight into Thor's visor. The glass cracked. He dropped Mason, who fell hard onto the concrete. Cale lunged next, grabbing Thor's weapon and smashing it against a pipe. Thor stumbled. Mason stood again and rammed into Thor with all his weight, pushing him back. Thor lost his balance, one more step, and he tumbled off the roof, vanishing into the smoke below. The silence that followed was sharp. The dropship hovered closer. Cale climbed inside first. Then Mason helped Rinja up, her legs weak. As the ship lifted off, they all collapsed against the walls, breathing heavily. Cale looked at Mason and nodded. "You just took down one of Vorthos's most feared enforcers." Mason wiped the blood from his chin. Felt more like surviving. Rinja leaned against Mason's shoulder, finally letting herself breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For knocking on your door, for dragging you into my life." Mason looked down at her. "I'm not." Outside the ship window, the city began to vanish below them, lights growing smaller. Somewhere in the stars ahead, justice waited. And maybe, just maybe, something like peace. The stars above the neutral zone were brighter than Mason had ever seen. No neon signs, no cargo drones, no noise. Just open space and silence. The dropship coasted gently toward a massive orbital station, an independent sanctuary known only to exiles, rebels, and the forgotten. Rinja leaned against the window, watching it grow larger. Her eyes no longer carried the panic of someone expecting to be chased. Instead, they held something strange, something fragile. Hope. Mason sat beside her, quiet. His arm still ached from the rooftop fight, but he didn't complain. Rinja had barely spoken since they boarded. Cale stood near the cockpit, arms crossed, eyes scanning every signal from their surroundings. "We'll be safe here?" Mason finally asked. Cale nodded. "The Council won't allow Vorthos ships near this sector, not after what we transmitted. It's all over the network." The Corps' evidence was confirmed by 2 Peace Council senators. "Arrests have already started on multiple worlds," Rinja turned. "The girls. The others who were still trapped, will they be freed?" Cale nodded. Again, "It started." Rinja didn't smile. "Not yet." But she closed her eyes and exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. The ship docked with the station quietly. There were no guards at the door, only a medical officer and 2 volunteers offering fresh clothing and warm drinks. Inside, the station felt like a refugee village built among stars. Families, aliens, humans, hybrids, everyone who had escaped something. No one stared at Rinja. No one questioned Mason. Here, everyone was simply allowed to exist. They were shown to a quiet room. It had 2 clean beds, a window overlooking the stars, and a fresh towel folded on each pillow. Rinja sat down slowly, like she didn't trust the softness. Mason stood at the door for a long time, watching her. "You're safe," he said, more to remind himself than her. She nodded slowly. But I still feel like I don't belong anywhere. You do, he said. Right here. Rinya looked up. Why did you help me, really? He stepped forward and sat beside her. Because when you knocked on my door, I saw someone who thought she was worthless. Someone who thought the only way to survive was to give herself away. And I couldn't let the galaxy treat you like that anymore. She blinked back tears. I didn't want to be a burden. You never were. You were the reason I remembered what it means to care. Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty. It was calm. A soft knock came. Kale entered, holding a datapad. They just aired the council's ruling. The trade networks been dismantled. Vorthus's leadership is under investigation. The camps are being opened. It's over. Rinya's hands covered her mouth. You did it, Mason said. Placing his hand gently over hers, she shook her head. We did. Kale placed the datapad on the table. I'm heading out in the morning. A new safe route opened for rescued kids. I'm going to help relocate them. He looked at Mason. You're welcome to come, or stay. Mason nodded. We'll talk about it. Kale turned to Rinya. I'll wait outside. When the door shut, Rinya stood and walked to the window. The stars glowed like candles in endless darkness. All my life I've been moved around like a number. I don't even know what I want to do tomorrow. I don't know what it's like to just choose something. You don't have to decide. Everything now, Mason said, stepping beside her. She looked at him. Can I choose to stay here? Just for a while? You can stay as long as you like. She leaned into him. Then tonight I'll just rest. No running, no hiding. He nodded. And tomorrow? I'll still be free. Mason smiled. Outside, the stars drifted slowly back out inside. For the first time in her life, Rinya laid down without fear of chains, without fear of being taken in the night. Mason pulled the blanket over her and sat beside the bed, watching over her like he had on that first night. But now, there was no danger behind the door, only peace.